Golriz Ghahraman. I've been a member of New Zealand's Parliament since October 2017. I represent the Green Party of Aotearoa, New Zealand in terms of my constituencies. Based on my portfolios in Parliament, that's ethnic communities, refugees, and issues like justice, foreign affairs, and defence. So I deal a lot with experts and communities affected by war, by global issues, and by race and inequality. I had been a lawyer for over a decade before I decided to run for Parliament. I'd worked on human rights and justice issues, in particular on holding governments to account after atrocities happen. Came back to New Zealand and I felt like I wanted to do something that was systemic. I wanted to bring human rights law to lawmaking. The Green movement made a lot of sense to me. I'd always been a Green Party member, so I like the idea that the things that degrade the environment are the same things that degrade human rights as well, and that we need to address inequality and the climate crisis together. That those are the core values of New Zealand's Green Party, and we see ourselves as a grassroots movement. So all of those things sat really well with my justice work. Being the first ever refugee MP was kind of, well, it was out of my control, it came up. I'm from Iran, so I'm from a place where we fight for democracy at the risk of death or torture. So the politicians, if that's a term that we can use, who inspire me are probably the activists back home, the women who are still fighting for women's rights, and we see that in Afghanistan now as well. We've seen it in Iran for decades and decades. You know, to say that there was a popular revolution that was about democracy right before I was born, and that thirst for equality and democracy is still something that people in my part of the world are fighting for is really inspiring to me. I hold myself to that standard. World Refugee Day for me is about recognizing and celebrating the humanity of everyone who is displaced by war or persecution. We're all very different from each other, just as any community is. So refugee women can be academics and artists and homemakers and mothers, and often we forget the elderly who cross borders, and we see that in Ukraine right now. So it's about recognizing that refugees are not defined by our victimhood, but by something very human, that we've also had hopes and dreams and birthday parties and weddings and wrote poetry, and we have a fundamental right, as do all, to be safe and to be equal. So that's what World Refugee Day is about. What we see around the globe right now is sometimes really scary for refugee communities. So what we've seen in the United Kingdom in terms of deporting refugees to Rwanda, what we see in Australia in their policy of offshore detention. And these ideas have all emanated from a place of deterrence. So we see parliaments trying to scare people escaping war or persecution from seeking safety. As parliamentarians, we have a responsibility to uphold the rule of law, which includes the Refugee Convention for most of our nations, certainly includes the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. No matter the region we're in, there is a basic code we do have to uphold as lawmakers, and that's about equality of people. So to say that certain people don't deserve to be free from torture or war, and that we'll try and make it as unsafe as possible, is us absconding on our responsibility as lawmakers and as good global citizens.